Okay, so are you getting ready to chair your first meeting in English?
Oh, wow. That's a big step.
Yeah, you must be prepping for something important.
Yeah, totally.
We are diving into a guide today all about leading meetings effectively,
And the thing is,
specifically when you are the one in charge.
yeah, when you are the one calling the shots, and
Yeah,
especially in English as a second language,
exactly.
it's not just about the words,
Uh,
it's about how you present yourself, how you guide the whole conversation.
yeah, like you are a conductor of an orchestra or something.
Exactly like an orchestra conductor,
Yeah.
you've got to keep everything moving smoothly.
I love that analogy.
Yeah, so this guide that we are looking at today, it jumps right into some really interesting strategies for getting everyone's attention. Like subtle things you can do.
Yeah, and they suggest that you emphasize the word please.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's just a small change, but it makes a big difference.
Yeah, instead of just saying, can I have your attention? It's more like, can I have your attention, please? Yeah, that little emphasis there, it changes the whole tone.
Right.
It becomes less of a question and more like you're directing people politely.
You're
You're
nice.
establishing your role as the leader you know.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
you were reminding everyone, okay, folks, time to focus.
Exactly.
I also noticed a tip about how to turn questions into statements.
Oh, tell me more about this.
Instead of asking, could I have your attention?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
could say, could I have your attention, please?
Interesting.
Deliver it more like a statement.
Yeah, so again, it's about projecting confidence,
Right.
using your voice to guide the meeting, and,
Mm.
that sets the tone for a good discussion.
Okay, so now moving on to welcoming attendees and doing introductions.
Yeah, this is important.
Yeah, this is a crucial moment, especially if it's a new group of people or the first time people are meeting.
Exactly, first impressions.
And the guide suggests this phrase. I'd like to welcome you all here today. Now let's get down to business.
Okay.
It's a little bit direct, don't you think?
I can see that.
I like being casual and professional,
Yeah.
but I don't know about that get down to business part.
Yeah, I think you're right. It might come across as a little strong.
Yeah, like too abrupt.
Maybe you could try something like, I'd like to welcome you all, and I'm looking forward to a productive discussion today.
I like that much better.
Yeah.
It still sounds professional.
It does, yeah, but it's a little softer,
Yes.
That's a more collaborative tone.
Okay, now let's talk about the agenda.
All right, agendas are key.
I saw that the guide uses go over and cover when talking about the agenda items.
Interesting.
I hadn't thought about using different synonyms like that to make things more interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Keeping the language varied can keep people engaged.
Right.
But beyond that, a well-structured agenda is essential for any meeting.
Yes, it keeps everyone on track.
Absolutely. It's like a roadmap.
Exactly.
So, yeah, good point about using those synonyms.
So speaking of keeping things moving, let's talk about transitions between agenda items.
Okay. Well, transitions.
The guide suggests using phrases like, let's move on to the next item to make the flow seamless.
Yeah.
But what are some other ways to make those transitions smooth and keep the energy up?
Well, think beyond just the words.
Oh, okay.
Your body language can be super important.
Right.
Making eye contact with the next speaker, nodding subtly, or even changing your posture.
Yeah.
These can all signal a transition without interrupting the flow.
So it's kind of like you are choreographing the whole meeting,
Exactly.
leading everyone through the steps with your words and your body language.
Precisely. And, another thing to think about is the cultural aspect.
That's a good point.
Because different cultures have different norms around these subtle cues.
That's true.
Like in some cultures, direct eye contact can seem aggressive, while in others, it's a sign of respect.
Right.
So be mindful of your audience and their background.
That's so important to be culturally sensitive as a good chair.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of engaging the audience, let's talk about how to encourage everyone to participate.
Okay. The guide recommends asking open-ended questions like, what's your opinion on this?
Oh, I like that.
It makes people feel like their thoughts are valuable,
It does.
like they're really being heard.
Yeah, it's a subtle way to make people feel like active participants.
Right.
And as the chair, you're not just there to give information, you're creating a space for everyone to contribute.
Right. You're like facilitating a collaborative environment.
Exactly.
And it's a balance between guiding the conversation and making sure everyone gets a chance to shine.
Well said.
But let's be real, not every meeting is perfect.
Oh, no, definitely not
Sometimes things go off script.
all the time.
So what about those unexpected moments?
That's where things get interesting.
The curveballs that life throws at you.
Yeah, you've got to be ready to adapt.
What about the person who just loves to hear themselves talk?
Oh, yeah. We've all been in those meetings.
And they go off on these tangents that completely derail the discussion.
Yes, the meeting monopoly.
What do you do? Well, the guide recommends gently steering them back on track.
Right.
You could say something like, let's not get too far off topic here.
Mm-hmm. But it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Exactly. Tone is everything.
You have to acknowledge their contribution, but not let the conversation get out of control.
Right. It's a delicate balance.
Like you are gently guiding that rogue instrument back into the orchestra.
I love that analogy.
So it sounds like mastering those subtle communication techniques is essential to being a good chair.
Absolutely. And
Oh.
as we go on, we will unpack even more strategies for navigating those tricky situations and keeping your meetings productive and engaging.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear more. So we will be right back with part 2, where we will dive into those tricky situations, including dealing with conflicts and making sure everyone feels heard.
Sounds good. See you soon.
Welcome back to our deep dive, all about chairing meetings in English.
It's great to be back.
And before the break, we were talking about all those unexpected moments in meetings.
The things that can really throw you off.
Right, those curveballs.
Yeah, it's like a sudden key change in the middle of a song.
You've got to adapt quickly.
Exactly. And sometimes those unexpected moments involve conflict.
Right, because conflict is bound to happen anytime you get a group of people together.
Exactly.
Right.
It's inevitable. The real skill is in how you handle it as the chair.
Right. You've got to guide the conversation towards a good resolution.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say 2 people are disagreeing about an idea. What's the first thing you should do?
That's a good question.
Do you step in right away or let them talk it out for a bit?
Well, it depends. You know,
Okay,
it's a balancing act. If things are getting really heated, you might need to intervene quickly.
to stop it from escalating.
Right. But sometimes letting them go back and forth for a bit can be helpful,
Yeah.
as long as they're being respectful, of course.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
So how do you know when it's time to step in?
I'd say pay attention to the tone of the conversation and the body language.
Okay.
If voices are getting raised or people are interrupting each other aggressively, that's your cue. You could say something like, I'm hearing strong opinions on both sides. Let's take a moment to make sure everyone feels heard.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it acknowledges the conflict without taking sides.
Right, and it doesn't shut down the discussion.
Exactly.
What if the conflict is more about someone who's dominating the conversation and not letting others speak?
Ah, yes. The meeting hog, we've all met them.
How do you deal with that?
Well, it's tough because you want to encourage participation, but you also need to make sure everyone gets a chance to talk.
Right.
You could try gently interrupting and redirecting them.
Oh, okay.
You could say something like, thanks for sharing your perspective. Now, I'd love to hear what others think about this point.
So you're making sure everyone's voice gets heard.
Exactly. And remember, sometimes a subtle gesture can be just as effective as words.
Oh, right. Like what?
You know, like making eye contact with someone who hasn't spoken yet,
Yeah,
or raising your hand slightly to signal that you want to bring someone else into the conversation.
that's true.
Those little cues can make a big difference.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about time management.
Okay, time management crucial in meetings.
Because we've all been in those meetings that drag on forever.
Oh yeah, it's exhausting.
So how do you keep things moving and make sure you cover all the important points without running over time?
Well, a clear agenda is essential,
Right.
and I would also recommend setting time limits for each item.
Okay.
You can say something like, we have a lot to cover today, so let's aim to spend about 15 minutes on each agenda item.
Okay.
And having a visual timer can also be helpful.
Oh, I like that.
It keeps everyone aware of the time, including you.
That's a good tip. Having that visual reminder can keep everyone focused.
Absolutely.
But what if the discussion is just too interesting to cut short
Oh yeah, that happens.
and you're running out of time?
Well, in that case, you can try to gently guide the conversation towards a close.
Okay, how do you do that?
You could say something like, this is a fascinating discussion, but we're running short on time. Can we summarize the key points and move on? Perhaps we can schedule a follow-up discussion to explore this further.
I like that you're acknowledging that the discussion is valuable.
Right, but also keeping things on track.
Okay, so we've talked about conflict resolution and time management.
Mhm.
Now,
Yeah.
what about cultural differences?
Oh, yes, that's a big one.
Because our listener could be working with people from all over the world
Right, and everyone has their own communication style.
and their own meeting etiquette.
Exactly. So
Oh.
cultural sensitivity is super important.
It's like what might be considered good sharing in one culture could be totally inappropriate in another.
Exactly. So you got to be aware of those differences.
But how do you navigate all those nuances?
It seems like a minefield. Well, it comes down to awareness and adaptability.
Okay.
If you know you'll be working with people from specific cultures, do a little research beforehand.
On their communication styles.
Exactly. And their meeting etiquette.
Okay.
It's a small effort that can make a big difference.
Right. It can help you avoid misunderstandings.
Exactly. And create a more harmonious atmosphere.
It's almost like you are learning a whole new language.
It is, yeah. The language of cultural sensitivity.
You're not just chairing a meeting, you're bridging cultural gaps.
Precisely. And remember, active listening is key.
Right.
Pay attention to how people are responding both verbally and non-verbally.
Okay.
If you sense someone is uncomfortable or hesitant to speak, try to draw them out in a way that respects their culture.
That's a good point.
And sometimes it's okay to just ask.
What do you mean?
If you're unsure about something, just say it.
Like what?
You could say, I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Could you tell me a little more about your perspective on this?
Oh, okay.
Most people will appreciate that you're making an effort to understand them.
Right. It shows respect.
Exactly.
So it's all about creating that safe space where everyone feels comfortable sharing their ideas.
Absolutely. Regardless of their background.
Okay, so we've covered conflict, time management, and cultural sensitivity. What about decision-making?
Ah, yes. Decision-making, the heart of many meetings.
It's like the grand finale of our symphony.
You bring all the different voices together to reach a resolution.
But decision-making can be messy.
Oh, it definitely can. Especially when you have strong personalities and different opinions in the room.
So how do you, as the chair, guide the group towards making good decisions?
Well, the first step is to be clear about the decision-making process itself.
Okay.
Is it a collaborative decision where everyone has an equal say?
Yeah.
Or is it ultimately your decision as the chair?
Right. You've got to set those expectations from the beginning.
Exactly. That can prevent a lot of confusion and frustration later on.
So you're laying the groundwork for a smooth process.
Right. And once the process is clear, you can use different techniques depending on the situation.
Like what?
Well, brainstorming is great for generating ideas.
Right.
Voting can be useful for quick decisions.
Yeah.
And consensus building is good when you need everyone to be on board with the final decision.
I love brainstorming. It's like a free flow of ideas.
It is, but it can get chaotic.
That's true. So how do you keep things on track and make sure you actually reach a decision?
Well, visual aids can be helpful.
Okay.
Like a whiteboard or a virtual brainstorming tool.
To keep the ideas organized.
Exactly. And as the chair, you can guide the process by asking prompting questions.
Like what?
You could ask things like, what are the potential benefits of this idea? Or what are the challenges we might encounter?
Right. You're shaping the discussion.
Exactly. And when it comes to voting, make sure the process is fair and transparent.
Okay.
A simple show of hands might work for some decisions, but for more complex issues, you might want to use online polling tools or even a secret ballot.
Right. It depends on the situation.
Exactly. And consensus building, well, that can be a bit trickier.
Yeah. It seems like it could take a long time.
It can, especially if people have strong opposing views, but it's often the best way to reach a decision that everyone can support.
Okay.
The key is to focus on finding common ground.
So how do you do that?
You could ask questions like, what are our shared goals?
Right.
Or what are the underlying needs that we're trying to address?
So you're trying to find that common thread that everyone can agree on.
Exactly. And remember, the goal isn't always to reach complete agreement.
Okay.
Sometimes it's about reaching a decision that the majority can support while respecting the viewpoints of those who disagree.
That makes sense, finding that balance.
Exactly. So what happens after the decision is made?
Right, because a decision is no good if it doesn't get implemented.
Exactly. That's where clear action steps come in.
Okay.
Once a decision has been made, you need to summarize the key points and outline the next steps.
Right.
Assign tasks, set deadlines, and clarify who's responsible for what.
Okay.
You might even want to create a shared document that everyone can refer to.
So you're setting the stage for action.
Exactly. And it's always a good idea to schedule a follow-up meeting.
To check on the progress.
Right, to address any challenges and make adjustments as needed.
Wow, we've covered so much in this part.
We have.
Conflict resolution, time management, cultural sensitivity, and decision-making.
It's a lot to think about.
It's clear that being a good chair requires a lot of different skills.
It does. It's like being a conductor, a diplomat, a mediator, and a leader all at the same time.
That's a great way to put it. But like we've been saying, these skills can be learned.
Absolutely, with practice and experience.
So for our listener who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed right now, just remember to take it one step at a time.
Good advice.
Focus on clear communication, active listening, and creating a positive and inclusive environment.
Those are the foundations.
And don't be afraid to ask for feedback.
Oh, that's so important. Feedback is how we learn and grow.
Right. It helps us get better.
So before we move on to part 3, I'm curious to hear from our listener.
Okay.
What has resonated with you the most so far?
What are your biggest takeaways?
We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
We will be back with part 3, where we'll dive into some specific phrases and techniques that you can use at different stages of your meeting.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
Yeah, we are ready for part 3.
And we are talking all about how to chair meetings effectively in English.
That's right.
And by now, I think you're starting to see that it's kind of like being an orchestra conductor.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
You've got all these different instruments, which are your participants, and you've got to bring them all together.
To create a beautiful symphony.
Exactly, a harmonious and productive symphony.
I like it. And just like a conductor needs their score,
Yeah.
a good chair needs their toolkit of phrases and techniques.
So let's dive into those specifics,
All right, let's do it.
starting with the opening of the meeting.
Okay, the very beginning.
The curtain rises, the audience is quiet.
Yeah, what do you say?
What's the first thing a good chair says?
Well, you want to get everyone's attention, but in a respectful way. You could say something like, if I may have everyone's attention, we'll get started.
Okay.
Or maybe a little more informally. All right, everyone, let's settle in. We've got a lot to cover today.
Right.
You're setting the tone right from the start.
It's interesting how those small choices can make a difference.
Yeah, tone is everything.
So you've got everyone's attention. Now what?
Now it's time to introduce the agenda.
Okay.
This is where you give everyone the roadmap for the discussion.
Okay.
Keep it clear and simple.
Like what?
Today, we're here to discuss topic. We'll be focusing on the key agenda items.
Straightforward.
Exactly.
Okay, so as we move through the agenda, what are some good phrases to use to transition smoothly between topics?
Yeah, we talked about nonverbal cues earlier,
Right? Body language.
but words are important too.
So what kinds of phrases?
You want to use signposting phrases?
Okay.
Like, now let's move on to next agenda item, or
Yeah.
shifting gears a bit, let's talk about new topic.
So people know what to expect.
Exactly. They help people mentally prepare for the next topic.
Like those announcements on a train, next stop.
Exactly.
Now, we talked a lot about encouraging participation earlier.
It's so important.
Are there any specific phrases that you find really helpful for drawing people out?
Well, open-ended questions are really effective.
Okay.
Instead of saying, do you agree?
Yeah,
Try something like, what are your thoughts on this participant's name?
I see.
It invites a more detailed response.
And don't forget the power of a pause.
That's true.
Sometimes silence can be really effective.
It gives people time to think.
Yes, exactly. So what about the other side of that?
What do you mean?
What about when someone is talking too much?
Ah, yes. The meeting monopolist.
How do you politely rein them in?
Well, you can redirect the conversation.
Okay.
You might say, thanks for sharing your perspective, participant's name. Now, I'd love to hear from some others on this.
Okay.
Or if someone's getting off topic, you could say, that's an interesting point, but let's make sure we stay focused on current topic for now.
Right. Gently steer them back. So you're making sure everyone gets a chance to contribute.
That's the goal.
Okay, so now we're nearing the end of the meeting.
Yeah, time to wrap things up.
We need a strong summary.
Absolutely, to bring everything together.
This is the grand finale.
The climax of the symphony.
So what are some good phrases to signal that this is the wrap-up?
You want to start with a clear signpost?
Like what?
You could say, to recap, we've discussed. Or, in summary, the key decisions we've made today are.
Okay.
And then briefly go over the main points.
To make sure everyone's on the same page.
Exactly, and highlight any important decisions or action steps.
It's like the conductor's final flourish.
Yes, bringing it all to a close.
And of course, always leave time for questions at the end.
Absolutely essential.
Any other questions or anything else we need to discuss before we wrap up?
Perfect. And then it's time for the final bow.
Any tips for a good closing?
Keep it simple and sincere.
Okay.
Something like, thank you all for your contributions today. I appreciate your time and insights.
Yeah, I like that.
You could also add something like, I'm confident we've made good progress today. Let's keep this momentum going.
That's great. It leaves everyone feeling positive and motivated.
Right. Like a round of applause after a great performance.
Well, this deep dive has been fantastic.
I agree. We've covered so much.
It's amazing how much there is to learn about chairing meetings effectively.
It's a skill that takes time and practice.
But it's a valuable skill to have.
Absolutely essential for anyone in a leadership role.
So to everyone out there who's about to chair a meeting for the first time,
Good luck.
you've got this.
Just remember the key points we've discussed.
Project confidence, guide the conversation, be culturally sensitive.
And don't be afraid of those challenging moments.
They are opportunities to learn and grow.
That's right. And remember, we are always here to help.
If you have any questions or want to share your own tips,
Please leave a comment below.
we love hearing from you.
Until next time, happy chairing.
And good luck with your meetings.